There's something about Mary that most Catholics have completely backwards, and this misunderstanding is exactly why December 8th, her feast day, holds a power that remains hidden from almost everyone. Because when you finally understand what the Immaculate Conception actually means, when you grasp why this particular day celebrates something that happened to Mary before she even took her first breath, you'll realize why 7 ancient practices connected to her and this day have been changing lives for centuries in ways that seem impossible to explain. Here's what nobody tells you. Mary isn't just a passive figure in salvation history. She's the door through which grace entered the world, and on December 8th, the feast celebrating her conception without sin, that door opens wider than on any other day of the year. But you can't just walk through it casually. There's a specific sequence, 7 precise practices that align you with the grace that flows through her on this day, and they work like a combination lock. You can't do just 1 or 2 and expect results. You can't pick the ones that seem easiest. You can't rearrange them. Each practice unlocks something specific that the next one requires, and miss one, and the entire sequence collapses. And here's the promise that changes everything. The people who have discovered and practiced all 7 of these secrets connected to Mary and the Immaculate Conception, in the exact order and timing that's been preserved, don't just receive the miracle they were praying for. Something far more profound happens. They report that grace begins to follow them, as if Mary herself opened an invisible door in their life that never fully closes again. They describe it as suddenly being in the right place at the right time, more often than coincidence can explain. They talk about opportunities appearing from nowhere, connections forming with people they needed to meet, resources showing up exactly when needed. It's as though performing these 7 practices through Mary on December 8th doesn't just answer one prayer, but shifts your entire relationship with the supernatural, turning you into someone who lives in a sustained flow of divine favor. Now, I need to tell you about what happened when someone tried to do only a few of the 7 practices, because this will show you why the complete sequence tied to Mary matters. In a Spanish monastery ledger from 1643, there's an entry about a merchant who'd lost everything in a fire and learned about these practices from a priest, but he was impatient. He did the first 3 practices on December 8th and then went about his regular routine, thinking he'd honored Mary enough. The ledger records that not only did his situation not improve, it actually got worse over the next 6 months. He lost what little he had left. And here's the disturbing part. The priest wrote that it was as if the partial practice had opened a door through Mary but left it hanging, creating an instability in the spiritual atmosphere around the man's life that wouldn't resolve. The following year, humbled and desperate, the merchant completed the full sequence. Within 3 months, he'd been offered a business partnership he never saw coming. Within a year, he'd rebuilt everything he'd lost and more. The ledger specifically notes, "Through the Immaculate One, the 7 must move as one, like the days of creation." So before we go any further, you need to make a decision right now. Are you willing to commit to learning all 7 practices connected to Mary on December 8th, even before you know what they are? Because what I'm about to reveal works in a sequence where each practice builds on the last, and understanding why they flow in this order is what makes them impossible to forget. The Immaculate Conception isn't what most people think it is, and that misunderstanding is exactly why these practices remain so powerful. Most people assume it refers to Jesus' conception, but it actually commemorates something far more mysterious. The moment Mary herself was conceived without original sin. Think about what that means. Before she was born, before she took her first breath, before she had any awareness of herself, something extraordinary had already happened to her. She was prepared for a purpose she wouldn't understand for decades. That's the first key to understanding why December 8th holds such unusual power through Mary specifically. It's a day that celebrates preparation that happens before you're even aware you need it. It honors the invisible work that took place in Mary, the kind of transformation that didn't announce itself with trumpets but changed everything nonetheless. And on December 8th, the grace that flows through Mary operates at a level that simply isn't available on ordinary days. In that same Carmelite monastery in Spain, there's a ledger that dates back to 1643. It's not on display. Most visitors never see it, but it contains the recorded testimonies of 107 individuals who claimed to receive what they called impossible graces through Mary's intercession after performing these specific practices on the feast of the Immaculate Conception. And here's what's fascinating. Every single one of them, all 107, specifically mentioned that they completed the full sequence and addressed each one to Mary. There's not one testimony from someone who did only some of them. These weren't wealthy nobles or church officials. They were farmers, servants, widows, mothers who'd lost children, men facing execution, people with diseases that had no cure. One account describes a woman who was barren for 16 years. She'd tried everything. She'd made pilgrimages to holy sites. She'd had masses said. Nothing changed. Then she learned about these practices from an elderly nun who was dying, who told her, "Do exactly what I'm about to tell you, all 7 things, speaking to the Mother of God on December 8th, and do nothing else that day." The woman asked if she could skip one because it seemed too difficult. The nun's response was recorded. "Then you will receive nothing through her. The 7 work as one body through Mary's heart." The woman completed the full sequence. 11 months later, she gave birth to a healthy son. Now here's what most people who hear about these practices make one critical mistake, and it happens before they even begin. They wake up on December 8th and immediately do what they do every other morning. They reach for their phone. They check messages. They let the day's anxieties flood in before they've taken a single conscious breath. And in doing so, they've already disrupted the frequency they need to connect with Mary. Because there's a window in the early morning, right when consciousness returns, but before your rational mind fully engages, when you're most permeable to spiritual reality, your defenses are down. Your doubts haven't fully activated. Your awareness of what's impossible hasn't yet constructed its walls around what you'll allow yourself to hope for. And on December 8th specifically, that window carries a frequency through Mary that doesn't exist on ordinary days. But that frequency is fragile. It can be shattered by the wrong kind of input in those first moments. This is what makes the first practice so critical, and why what happens in your first 3 minutes of consciousness determines whether the rest of the day will build on something real or nothing at all. But here's what creates the problem that most people don't see coming. Even if you somehow instinctively know to protect those first 3 minutes, even if you resist reaching for your phone, even if you lie there in that sacred space between sleep and waking, what do you actually say? Because most people, when they try to pray first thing in the morning, fall into one of 2 traps. Either they launch into the same memorized prayers they've said 1,000 times, words that have become so automatic they're basically meaningless, or they start begging, listing everything they need, everything they're afraid of, everything that's wrong. And both of these approaches do the same thing. They set the wrong frequency for the entire day. The ancient practitioners understood something that modern people have forgotten. The way you use language in those first conscious moments literally tunes your awareness to a specific bandwidth of reality. Think of it like setting a radio dial. If you set it to the frequency of lack, of desperation, of "I don't have," that's the frequency you'll operate on all day. You'll see evidence of what you don't have everywhere you look. But there's a different frequency available on December 8th through Mary, a frequency of grace that's already moving, already preparing, already at work. The question is whether you know how to tune into it. And here's the part that seems almost too simple, which is exactly why people miss it. You don't tune into that frequency by adding more words. You tune into it by speaking to Mary as if she's actually in the room with you, not as a distant saint in heaven, but as a mother sitting beside your bed. Not formally, not with elaborate titles, but the way you'd speak to someone you trust completely when you're still half asleep and your defenses are down. The moment you become conscious, while you're still in that hazy space, you tell Mary one specific thing you need, one impossible situation you're facing, one miracle you've given up hoping for. But here's where everything hinges on a single shift in language that most people never make. You don't tell her what you need her to do, you tell her what you see beginning to shift through her prayers. Not, "Mother Mary, I need you to help me with this problem," but "Mother, I see this situation transforming through your prayers." Not, "Please give me what I'm asking for," but "I'm ready to receive what you've prepared for me." You're not begging, you're not bargaining. You're acknowledging a reality that exists beyond what your physical eyes can see. A reality where she is already interceding for you, already bringing your need before her Son. You're positioning yourself as someone who expects grace through Mary, who has already made room for the miracle before it arrives. This linguistic shift actually changes your brain state. Neuroscience would call it moving from a state of lack to a state of receptivity. The ancient monks would have called it moving from petition to participation with the Mother of God. And then you do something that most people skip, which is why their morning prayer doesn't work. You lie there for 2 full minutes in complete silence. No more words, no more thoughts if you can help it, just silence in Mary's presence. This is where most people fail, because 2 minutes of silence feels like an eternity. Your mind will want to race ahead, your phone will call to you, the day's responsibilities will start pressing in. But those 2 minutes of silence after you've spoken to Mary are where the alignment actually happens. It's where your internal frequency adjusts to match the frequency of grace that flows particularly strong through her on this day. If you don't complete these 2 minutes, if you break them to check the time, or scratch an itch, or let a thought carry you away, you haven't completed the first practice. And everything that follows will be building on a foundation that isn't there. That's the first practice, the morning acknowledgement. You speak to Mary in present tense about your miracle, as if it's already beginning. Then you hold 2 minutes of complete silence in her presence. But now you have a new problem. And this problem is what trips up everyone who's ever tried to maintain a spiritual practice for an entire day. Because here's what happens the moment you get out of bed. The frequency you just set with Mary, that perfect alignment you created in those first 3 minutes, immediately comes under attack. Not from demons or dark forces, but from something far more mundane and far more dangerous, your own habits. You walk to the nightstand and instinctively reach for your phone. You go to the kitchen and automatically make coffee. You turn on the news. You check your email. You start scrolling. And with each of these small, unconscious actions, the frequency you set with Mary gets corrupted, distorted, drowned out by the noise of ordinary consciousness. By mid-morning, that sacred alignment you created, it's gone, completely obliterated by the momentum of your normal routines. This is the problem that destroyed the practice for centuries of people who tried to do these 7 things. They'd do the first one perfectly, have a genuine experience with Mary in those first 3 minutes, feel something real shifting, and then they'd lose it all within an hour because they didn't understand what the second practice was actually for. You'd think that on Mary's feast day, the second practice would be about adding more prayers to her, more devotions, more spiritual exercises. But that's exactly backwards. The ancient practitioners discovered something counterintuitive. You don't protect a frequency by adding more noise to it, even holy noise. You protect it by creating space, by removing something. Most of us live our lives in a state of constant consumption. We're always taking something in, always filling ourselves with input, always reaching for the next hit of stimulation or comfort or distraction. Food, information, entertainment, validation, substances, whatever form it takes. And that constant filling leaves no room for anything new to enter, no room for Mary's grace to move freely in your life. You can't pour water into a cup that's already full. So here's what the second practice requires, and why it has to stay hidden. You choose one thing that normally fills your day, something you habitually reach for, and you remove it completely for these 24 hours without explaining why to anyone who might notice. For some people, this is their phone. For others, it's coffee, or news, or music, or complaining, or giving advice, or checking their reflection. The key is that it has to be something you'd normally interact with multiple times throughout the day, something whose absence creates a noticeable gap. But here's the part that makes this practice essential. Every time you reach for that thing on December 8th and remember you've chosen to fast from it, you don't just resist the urge. You take that moment of wanting and you redirect it. You turn it into a silent offering to Mary. Mother, I give you this moment. This creates dozens of small moments throughout the day when you're actively choosing to maintain the frequency you set in the morning. Each moment of choosing not to fill that gap is like adding another layer of protection around your alignment with her. But it only works if you keep it hidden. The moment you tell someone, I'm fasting from my phone today for the Immaculate Conception, or I'm not drinking coffee because it's Mary's feast day, you've shifted the energy. Now you're doing it for recognition, for explanation, for someone else's understanding. The power drains out. This is why it's called the hidden fast. The hiddenness is what gives it power. The secrecy is what protects the frequency. Mary treasured things in her heart, and this practice asks you to do the same. That's the second practice, the hidden fast. You choose one thing you habitually consume and fast from it all day in complete secrecy, turning each moment of wanting into a silent offering to Mary. But now you're facing an even more subtle problem, and this is the one that causes people to arrive at the end of December 8th, wondering why nothing happened. Because here's what you don't realize is happening. You've set the frequency with Mary in those first 3 minutes. You've been protecting it all morning through hidden offerings to her every time you resisted filling that gap you created, but you're sleepwalking through the day. You're physically present but mentally absent, running on autopilot, lost in thoughts about yesterday or plans for tomorrow. And when you're not actually present, when you're not awake in this moment right now, grace can be flowing all around you and you'll miss it completely. Think about how you normally move through your day. You walk from room to room without noticing you're walking. You open doors without awareness that you're opening them. You cross thresholds dozens of times, leaving your bedroom, entering your kitchen, walking out your front door, stepping into buildings, and not once do you actually register the transition. You're physically crossing from one space to another, but mentally you're somewhere else entirely. And on an ordinary day, that's fine. But on December 8th, when grace is moving through Mary at an intensity that doesn't exist on other days, that unconsciousness means you're missing everything. The old mystics knew something that's been almost completely lost. Boundaries aren't just physical markers. Thresholds, doorways, the spaces where one thing ends and another begins. These are places where the membrane between natural and supernatural becomes thin, where crossover becomes possible in ways that don't happen in the middle of rooms or the center of open spaces. And on Mary's feast day, these threshold moments become portals through which her grace can enter, if you're awake enough to receive it. But how do you stay awake? How do you remain present when your mind has been trained by years of distraction to be anywhere except here? This is where the third practice becomes brilliant, because it hijacks something you're already doing all day and transforms it into a trigger for presence. Every time you cross a threshold on December 8th, and you will cross 30 or 40 of them throughout the day, you stop for 3 seconds with one foot on each side of the threshold. In those 3 seconds, you don't pray elaborate prayers to Mary. You don't think positive thoughts. You simply become aware that you're crossing from one space into another, and you acknowledge internally that Mary is present in this transition. A simple interior word, Mother, you are here. That's it, 3 seconds. But here's why it matters. By the end of December 8th, you will have created 30 or 40 moments of conscious presence throughout your day. 30 or 40 moments of waking up to Mary's presence with you, and presence is the doorway through which miracles enter natural reality. Most of the grace Mary wants to pour into our lives goes unclaimed simply because we're not present enough to receive it. We're replaying yesterday or rehearsing tomorrow, and the gift she's offering right now passes by unnoticed. Each threshold crossing becomes like pressing a reset button on your awareness, like opening your eyes again to see Mary standing beside you. By the time you reach the fourth practice, your consciousness has been recalibrated. You're awake in a way you normally aren't, and this awakened state is absolutely essential for what comes next. That's the third practice, the threshold pause. Every time you cross a threshold, you stop for 3 seconds with one foot on each side and acknowledge Mary's presence. But here's the problem you're about to run into, and it's the problem that reveals whether these practices are actually working or whether you've just been going through religious motions. Because everything you've done so far, setting the frequency with Mary, protecting it through hidden offerings, activating presence through threshold moments, all of it has been about positioning yourself to receive. You've been opening your hands, making yourself available, creating space for grace to enter. But there's a principle of spiritual physics that trips everyone up, and if you don't understand it, you'll arrive at this point in the day and discover that your hands are still empty. You can't just hold out your hands to Mary and expect grace to fill them. There has to be an exchange, a reciprocity, a movement in both directions. And the nature of what you offer determines the nature of what you receive. Most people approach Mary like beggars approaching a queen. They come with empty hands, listing everything they lack, everything they need, everything they hope to receive through her prayers. And they wonder why their petitions seem to go unanswered. It's not that Mary doesn't want to intercede, it's that they've positioned themselves in a way that makes receiving impossible. They've come with nothing to offer, and you can't exchange nothing for something, even with the Mother of God. Think about Mary's own story. When the angel came to her, she didn't just receive passively. She said yes. She offered herself. She brought something to the exchange. Her willingness, her trust, her complete surrender to a plan she didn't fully understand, and that offering is what made the incarnation possible. Grace came through her because she had something to give. So, here's the problem. What do you actually have to offer Mary? And here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the honest answer for most of us is, not much. We don't have impressive virtue. We don't have deep faith. We don't have spiritual accomplishments to present. We're broke, we're broken, we're barely holding it together. So what could we possibly give her that would create an exchange? This is where the fourth practice becomes revolutionary, because it asks you to offer the one thing you actually have, the only thing that's authentically yours, your poverty, your mess, your brokenness, your confusion. Whatever is actually real in your life right now, even if it's ugly. At some point on December 8th, you need to find 15 minutes where you can be completely alone. In those 15 minutes, you speak out loud as if Mary is sitting across from you, and you tell her everything you have to give, not what you want to receive, but what you have to offer. And you have to be specific and honest. This isn't about listing your good qualities to impress her. It's about inventorying what's actually in your storehouse right now. Maybe all you have is heartbreak and confusion. Perhaps you've been trusting God for healing. Maybe you have anger that you've been trying to pray away for years. Maybe you have disappointment, or stubbornness, or fear, or doubt, or a tiny flickering hope that you're almost embarrassed to acknowledge. Whatever is actually there, you name it to Mary. You say it out loud, and you offer it to her. Mother, this is what I have. This is all I have right now. I'm giving it to you. Mary understands emptiness. She was a young girl with nothing to offer but her yes, and God filled that emptiness with His Son. When you offer Mary your emptiness honestly, you're actually giving her exactly what she can work with. You're no longer pretending to be worthy. You're no longer performing spiritual maturity you don't possess. You're just being real. And realness creates an opening for grace to move. That's the fourth practice, the reverse petition. You spend 15 minutes alone telling Mary what you have to offer her, not what you want from her. But now you're going to face a test. And how you respond to this test will determine whether everything you've built today collapses or continues to build. Because here's what you need to understand. Life doesn't stop being life just because it's December 8th and Mary's feast day. You've set this intention to move through the day with awareness, with presence, with openness to her grace. You've created this beautiful plan for how the day should unfold, and then reality intervenes. An unexpected phone call comes. A person shows up at the wrong time. A problem demands your attention. A need pulls you away from what you had planned. Something or someone interrupts your carefully constructed spiritual day, and in that moment, you have a choice. You can resist the interruption, resent it, try to get through it as quickly as possible so you can get back to your real spiritual practice. Or you can recognize that the interruption might be the practice. This is the test that most people fail without even realizing they're being tested. Because we have this idea that a holy day should be peaceful, uninterrupted, flowing smoothly according to our spiritual agenda. And when reality doesn't match that image, when something intrudes on our plans, we feel like the day is ruined, like we've failed somehow, like we've lost our opportunity with Mary. We get frustrated, we resist, we resent, and in doing so, we slam the door on the very thing she's been trying to bring us. Think about Mary's own life. Did it go according to her plans? She was a young girl, probably planning a normal life with Joseph, maybe imagining a quiet existence in Nazareth. And then an angel appeared with news that interrupted everything she thought her life would be. She could have resisted. She could have said, "This isn't what I planned. This isn't convenient. Can you come back at a better time?" But she didn't. She said yes to the interruption. And that yes changed the course of human history. On December 8th, someone or something will interrupt what you're doing. This will happen, not might happen, will happen. And the moment you recognize you're being interrupted, before you respond to whatever or whoever is interrupting you, you take a breath and you say internally to Mary, "Mother, I receive this from your hands. This is part of what today is supposed to be." Then you give whatever has interrupted you your complete attention, not as an obligation or a burden, but as a gift Mary has chosen to place in your path. That moment of acceptance, that internal yes to what you didn't plan for, creates a crack in your agenda where grace can enter. Often, the miracle people are praying for doesn't come in the form they expected. It comes through the interruption they almost resented. It comes through the detour they almost refused. It comes wearing unexpected clothes, and only someone who's learned to say yes to interruptions will recognize it when it arrives. That's the fifth practice, the interruption offering. When something interrupts your day, you consciously receive it from Mary's hands before you respond to it. But now it's getting late. December 8th is drawing to a close. And most people who've made it this far, who've actually completed the first 5 practices, are about to lose everything they've built because they don't know what happens next. Here's what typically happens at the end of a day, even a special day like December 8th. You collapse into bed exhausted, maybe scroll through your phone one last time, possibly say a quick prayer if you remember, and drift off into unconsciousness. And everything that happened throughout the day, all the subtle shifts, all the small graces, all the moments of alignment with Mary, dissolves into forgetfulness. By morning, it's as if the day never happened. You can barely remember what you experienced, and whatever began feels lost, unanchored, floating away like a dream you can't quite recall. This is the tragedy that plays out every December 8th in millions of lives. Grace moves, Mary works, small miracles begin. But because no one captures what's happening, because no one marks the shift, it evaporates. The frequency returns to normal. The transformation doesn't take root. People wake up December 9th and think, did anything actually happen yesterday? I'm not sure. I don't feel different. Maybe it didn't work. But here's what they don't understand. Most miracles don't announce themselves. They begin quietly, in small shifts and subtle changes that only someone who's paying attention will notice. A slight easing of anxiety, a small increase in hope, a brief moment when something that felt impossible suddenly seemed like it might maybe eventually become possible. These aren't dramatic transformations. They're the first movements of grace, the way a child moves in the womb, so subtle that you might miss it if you're not paying attention, but undeniably real if you are. The problem is that if you don't capture these moments, if you don't write them down, if you don't mark what happened, they'll be gone by morning. Your rational mind will dismiss them. Your doubt will erase them. Your impatience will overlook them, because they're not the full manifestation of your miracle yet. And in losing the record of what began, you lose your ability to cooperate with what's continuing. So before you go to sleep on December 8th, you sit down with paper and pen, not a phone or computer, but actual paper and pen, and you write down 3 specific things as if you're reporting them to Mary, telling her what you noticed of her work. First, you write down one moment from the day when you felt even the smallest sense of peace, ease, rightness, or unexpected grace. It might have been brief. It might have been so subtle you almost missed it. But there was a moment, even in a difficult day, when something shifted slightly. You describe that moment in detail, acknowledging it as Mary's gift to you. Second, you write down one thing you noticed that you normally would have missed. This is where the threshold pause pays off. Because you've been practicing presence all day, you will have noticed something. Maybe it was the quality of light at a certain hour, or an expression on someone's face, or a thought that arose that felt like it came from beyond your own mind, or a coincidence that was too specific to dismiss. You write down what Mary showed you. Third, and this is the most important part, you write down one way you're different than you were when you woke up and first spoke to Mary that morning. Not how you feel different. Feelings fluctuate, but how you know differently, see differently, believe differently, trust her differently, even if the difference is barely perceptible. Has your relationship to your impossible situation shifted even 1 degree? Has your capacity to trust Mary's timing expanded even slightly? Have you become even minutely more willing to wait for what you cannot force? By writing these 3 things down, you're creating a record of what Mary began. And this record becomes crucial in the weeks and months that follow, when you might be tempted to think nothing happened, when you might be tempted to believe these practices didn't work. You'll have evidence, in your own handwriting, that something shifted on December 8th, even if the full miracle hasn't manifested yet. That's the 6th practice, the evening inventory. You write down 3 specific things: a moment of grace, something you noticed, and one way you're different. But there's one final practice, one last act that seals everything else and determines whether what began today continues beyond today. And this is the practice that most people, even after completing everything else perfectly, stumble on, because it requires something that goes against every instinct we have. Here's the final problem you're facing as December 8th comes to a close. You've done everything right. You've set the frequency with Mary in those first 3 minutes. You've protected it all day through the hidden fast. You've activated presence through every threshold. You've created an exchange by offering her your honest poverty. You've received the interruption that came. You've captured what happened in writing. You've shown up in every way you knew how. And now, as you're lying in bed about to go to sleep, there's a temptation that's going to be almost irresistible. The temptation to clench, to control, to try to make something happen with all the spiritual energy you've built up today, to mentally rehearse how the miracle should unfold, when it should arrive, what it should look like, to grip tightly to your prayers, your petition, your need, as if holding on tighter will make Mary work faster. This is where the entire day can collapse, because grace can't enter a clenched fist. Mary can't work with arms that won't let go. Everything you've built today has been about opening to her intercession, about making yourself available, about creating space for grace to move. But opening isn't enough if you don't also release. If you don't let go of trying to control the outcome, you're essentially taking back everything you offered her today. Think about it. You've spent all day building trust in Mary's timing, in her wisdom, in her knowledge of what you need and when you need it. But if you go to sleep clutching, controlling, trying to force the miracle to materialize according to your schedule, you're revealing that you don't actually trust her at all. You're showing that you were just going through the motions of surrender while keeping your hands on the steering wheel the whole time. Mary knows what you need better than you do. She knows when you're ready to receive it better than you do. She knows how the answer should come better than you do. Your job isn't to figure out the details or control the timeline. Your job is to do what she did when the angel came. Say yes, and then rest in confidence that what's been promised will unfold in its proper time. So right before you go to sleep on December 8th, whether it's actually midnight or just your bedtime, you do one last thing. You place both hands over your heart and you speak one sentence out loud to Mary. Mother, whatever I'm still holding that needs to go, I release it now into your hands. You don't specify what you're releasing. You don't mentally inventory your fears or doubts or control issues. You simply acknowledge that there are things you're holding on to, probably unconsciously, that are blocking the very thing you've been asking her to pray for, and you open your hands. Literally, physically open your hands after you've spoken that sentence, and you go to sleep with your hands open, not clenched, not folded, not under your pillow, but resting openly at your sides or on your stomach. This is the final act of trust in Mary. You've done everything the day asked of you. You've shown up in every way you knew how. You've accompanied her through each threshold, each offering, each moment of presence. Now you're going to rest in the confidence that what needed to begin through Mary on December 8th has begun through her, even if you can't see it yet, even if it doesn't feel finished, even if your situation still looks exactly the same as it did when you woke up. You trust that Mary is working, that she heard you, that she's bringing your need to her Son, and that she knows better than you how and when the answer should come. That's the seventh practice, the midnight release. And as you lie there with your hands open, something becomes clear about what you've actually done today. Because each of these 7 practices wasn't random. Each one built on the last, creating a circuit that runs directly through Mary's heart. You started this morning by tuning your frequency to hers, speaking to her in present tense, acknowledging what's already beginning to shift through her prayers, then resting in silence in her presence. That morning acknowledgement set everything in motion. Then throughout the day, you protected that frequency by creating space, choosing one thing to fast from in complete secrecy, turning each moment of wanting into a hidden offering to her. The hidden fast kept the channel clear. You activated your consciousness over and over again, stopping at every threshold for 3 seconds, 1 foot on each side, acknowledging her presence in every transition. The threshold pause woke you up to what was happening. You shifted from begging to participating, spending 15 minutes telling Mary what you actually have to offer instead of what you want from her, laying your honest poverty at her feet. The reverse petition created the exchange. You said yes to what you didn't plan for, receiving the interruption that came as something from her hands, something she wanted you to unwrap. The interruption offering tested your surrender. You captured what she did, writing down 3 specific things: a moment of grace, something you noticed, one way you're different. The evening inventory marked what began. And now you're releasing your grip, letting go of control, trusting her timing, sleeping with your hands physically open. The midnight release seals everything in her care. 7 practices, 7 movements through Mary's heart, each one unlocking what the next one requires, each one building on what came before. Together, they form a complete sequence of cooperation with the grace that flows through her on this day that celebrates her own beginning. The Immaculate Conception isn't the end of something, it's the start. It's conception, not birth. It's the moment when something that will eventually transform everything begins so quietly that most people don't notice it's happening. She was prepared for her purpose before she could cooperate with it consciously, but once she understood what she'd been prepared for, her entire life became an act of cooperation with that grace. That's what you've done today through these 7 practices. You've cooperated with grace that's already moving through Mary, already working, already preparing things you can't see yet. And now, as you drift off to sleep with your hands open, you're trusting that what was conceived today will, in its proper time, become undeniable. Because these practices only work for people who are desperate enough to actually complete all 7. If your situation isn't urgent, if you're just casually interested, they won't do anything for you. They're for the desperate, the ones who've run out of their own solutions, the ones who know they need something beyond what human effort can produce, the ones who are ready to entrust everything to Mary's maternal care. If that's you, then December 8th with Mary is your day. Not just any December 8th, but this one, the one that's here right now. Don't expect fireworks when you wake up December 9th. Don't expect feelings. Don't expect certainty that something has changed. What you're looking for is much subtler. A shift in your internal landscape, a slight increase in your capacity to trust her, a small expansion in your ability to wait without despair, a tiny opening in what you believed was possible. That might not sound like much, but it's everything, because miracles don't happen to people who have all the answers and all the faith and all the confidence. Miracles through Mary happen to people who have just enough willingness to stay open just a little bit longer, just enough trust to place one more day in her hands. You have a choice right now. You can treat this like interesting information about Mary, something you might try if you remember. Or you can recognize that this moment, right now, this awareness that you're being shown something that could change everything, is itself part of the grace of December 8th reaching toward you through her. December 8th is already set apart as Mary's feast. The grace is already flowing more strongly through her intercession on this day. The question is simply whether you're going to position yourself to receive what's already being offered. Your miracle might already be conceived in Mary's prayers. You might just need to cooperate with its emergence through the complete sequence. Because what begins on December 8th, when you perform all 7 practices in their proper sequence through her intercession, has a way of changing not just one moment, but your entire trajectory. The grace that follows those who complete these 7 secrets through Mary doesn't just answer one prayer. It repositions your entire life in the flow of divine favor that moves through her maternal hands. And that transformation is possible, starting tomorrow morning, when you wake up and speak to Mary in those first 3 minutes before you reach for anything else.